In Ashworth Manor's marble corridors, a servant scrubbing floors at dawn was about to discover a truth that would destroy her family's lives. What started as another morning of silent servitude took a shocking turn when she found hidden documents bearing her name. Elena Ashworth wasn't your typical housemaid. For 22 years, she had endured psychological manipulation, known for her quiet resilience despite constant cruelty. When she pressed a secret rose carving, she had no idea she was uncovering proof of her stolen inheritance. What began as desperate curiosity would become total power reversal. The family would never recover from learning their servant owned everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The grandfather clock chimed 5 times, its bronze notes echoing through Ashworth Manor's corridors. Elena's eyes opened instantly. 22 years of this routine had trained her body to wake before the sound reached her cramped quarters beneath the main staircase. What had once been a storage room now served as her bedroom, barely accommodating a narrow cot, small dresser, and cleaning supplies. She moved with practiced silence, showering quickly in the servant's bathroom behind the kitchen, before dressing in the plain gray uniform Victoria insisted she wear. By 5:40, she was already preparing the family's elaborate breakfast, finding peace in the repetitive motions, measuring coffee, slicing fruit, arranging everything to perfection. Fresh strawberries for Miss Sophia. Marcus likes his eggs over easy. Victoria wants her toast barely golden. These details mattered. A bruised strawberry would earn sharp criticism. Overcooked eggs meant starting over. Elena knew their preferences better than they knew each other's. At 7:30, Victoria descended the staircase, silk robe flowing, carrying herself with unquestioned authority. Her pale blue eyes swept the dining room with military precision. "Elena?" Her voice carried dismissive irritation. "The coffee is too strong again. How many times must I explain that Mr. Ashworth prefers it mild?" Elena felt the familiar chest tightness. "I made it exactly as he's always preferred, ma'am. Perhaps..." "Don't perhaps me." Victoria's interruption cut like glass. "Simply do as you're told. And when you've corrected that mistake, we need to discuss something." Elena hurried to prepare fresh coffee, anxiety churning. Discussions with Victoria rarely ended well. Marcus joined his mother at the mahogany table, 25 years old, with casual arrogance, born from never having comfort questioned. His expensive pajamas probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. "Morning, Elle," he said without looking up from his phone. The casual shortening of her name felt like another small dominance assertion. "Hope you're prepared for a busy day. Having friends over tonight. 8, maybe 10. They'll stay late, so don't plan on much sleep." Elena nodded, already mentally cataloging additional work. "I'll make sure everything is ready." Marcus finally looked up, smirking. "You know, Elle, you might want to start thinking about your future. What happens when..." He gestured toward Robert's upstairs bedroom. "When things change around here." The casual cruelty made Elena's breath catch. Robert Ashworth, the man she'd called father despite Victoria's reminders that she was merely adopted charity, had been declining for months. Hearing Marcus discuss it with such indifference felt like a physical blow. "Marcus." Victoria's voice carried warning. "We'll discuss such matters at the appropriate time." But damage was done. Elena could see calculation in both their eyes, the future they were planning without her. Sophia appeared in the doorway, looking younger than 20 in an oversized sweater, moving with uncertainty as if constantly apologizing for existing. "Morning," she said quietly, sliding into her chair. Elena set Sophia's plate before her, carefully arranged strawberries, precisely cut toast. Their eyes met briefly, and Elena caught something unexpected. Not dismissive indifference, but something resembling guilt. "I'm not very hungry," Sophia said softly, pushing the plate away. "Elena, would you like..." She caught Victoria's sharp look and let the sentence die. The small gesture created a tiny crack in Elena's despair. Someone here occasionally remembered she was human. Victoria's spoon clicked against her coffee cup with deliberate precision. Elena, as mentioned, we need to discuss your additional responsibilities. Mr. Ashworth's condition worsened overnight. Dr. Matthews believes he may not have much time left. The words hit like a physical blow. Elena had known this was coming, but hearing it stated so clinically made it terrifyingly real. The doctor suggests round-the-clock care. Since we can't afford a private nurse, you'll take on those duties alongside your regular responsibilities. Elena nodded numbly. Of course, even Robert's final days would become another burden for her alone. Good? Victoria's smile was winter-sharp. I knew you'd want to do everything possible for the man who so generously gave you a home. The emphasis on generously was another reminder of Elena's place, a debt never fully repaid, a charity case grateful for scraps. An hour later, Elena climbed stairs to Robert's bedroom, carrying medication and thin soup. The second floor felt different, quieter, subdued, as if walls understood they witnessed an era's end. Robert's room was her favorite manor space. Unlike Victoria's cold perfection elsewhere, this felt lived in, human. Books lined walls with worn spines from actual reading. Family photos covered the dresser, though Victoria had gradually replaced older pictures with recent ones featuring only her children. Robert lay propped against pillows, once robust frame, now fragile. His gray-green eyes, the same shade Elena saw in mirrors, tracked to her as she entered. Elena. His voice was barely a whisper but carried warmth she never heard elsewhere. Come here, dear one. She approached, setting the tray aside before taking his thin hand. His grip was weak but warm, and momentarily she allowed herself to believe she truly belonged somewhere. Father, she began, but he shook his head slightly. Listen to me. His eyes held urgent intensity. There are things you need to know. About your mother. About who you really are. Elena's heart raced. What do you mean? Robert's eyes darted toward the door, then back. He tried sitting straighter, breathing labored. In my study, behind the bookshelf, there's a panel. Press the rose carving. Father, you're not making sense. Please rest. His grip tightened with surprising strength. Promise me. Promise you'll look. The truth. You deserve the truth. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Robert's eyes widened, and he fell back against pillows, deliberately steadying his breathing. Victoria appeared in the doorway, expression unreadable. How is he? Resting comfortably, Elena replied, mind spinning from Robert's cryptic words. Good. Don't tire him with unnecessary conversation. He needs his strength. As Elena left, Robert's words echoed. Behind the bookshelf, a rose carving. The truth. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond resignation. Hope was dangerous, a luxury she'd learned to live without. But Robert's urgency stayed with her as she descended to continue endless duties. What truth could be so important that a dying man would risk everything to share it? Why did Victoria's watchful eyes suggest she knew exactly what secrets Robert was trying to reveal? The afternoon stretched ahead, cleaning, cooking, preparing for Marcus's gathering. But underneath, a new current ran through her thoughts. Tonight, when the house was quiet, she would find courage to discover what Robert had been trying to tell her. The truth felt like the first real gift anyone had tried to give her. Despite accompanying fear, Elena knew she would be brave enough to claim it. Marcus's hand tightened around his whiskey glass as Elena cleared the remnants of his friend's party from the dining room. It was nearly midnight, and the last of his guests had finally departed, leaving behind a chaos of empty bottles, stained linens, and cigarette ash ground into Persian carpets that were older than Elena herself. The evening had been everything Marcus promised. Loud, excessive, and deliberately inconsiderate. Elena had spent hours serving drinks, cleaning spills, and enduring the casual gropes and crude comments from his friends. Now, as she worked silently to restore order, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical presence. Leave it, Marcus slurred from his position, sprawled across the leather sofa. Do it tomorrow. Your mother expects the dining room pristine for breakfast, Elena replied quietly, continuing to stack plates. Marcus's laugh was ugly. Mother expects a lot of things. Doesn't mean she gets them anymore. Something in his tone made Elena pause. There was a bitterness there she hadn't heard before, mixed with anticipation that chilled her. She finished her work in silence, Marcus's words echoing strangely as she climbed the stairs. The second floor was dark, except for the soft glow emanating from beneath Robert's door. Dr. Matthews had visited again that afternoon, his grave expression telling Elena everything she needed to know about Robert's prognosis. Elena knocked softly before entering. Robert lay propped against pillows, his breathing shallow and labored. The strong man who had once carried her on his shoulders when she was small was barely a shadow of himself now. "Elena," he whispered, his eyes focusing on her with visible effort. "I was hoping you'd come." She approached the bed, settling into the chair she'd occupied for countless hours over the past weeks. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man running out of time." His attempt at a smile was heartbreaking. "Which is why we need to talk." "About what I tried to tell you earlier." Elena leaned closer, glancing toward the door out of habit. The house felt different at night. Secrets seemed closer to the surface, truth more possible in the darkness. "You mentioned my mother," she said carefully, "and something about who I really am." Robert's eyes sharpened despite his weakness. "Your mother was the most beautiful woman I ever knew, inside and out. Her name was Catherine Elena Morrison." Elena's breath caught. "Morrison? But that's James Morrison's daughter, yes." Robert's voice was barely audible. "The lawyer handling my estate. He's your uncle, Elena. Your family." The room seemed to tilt around her. James Morrison, the grave, guilt-ridden man who'd been visiting more frequently as Robert's condition worsened, was her uncle? But that would mean... "I don't understand," Elena whispered. Robert struggled to sit higher, wincing with pain. "Catherine was pregnant when she died in that car accident. You were 3 years old. I was supposed to be your guardian, to raise you as my own daughter. But Victoria..." His voice turned bitter. "Victoria saw an opportunity." Elena's mind raced, trying to process the implications. "You're saying I'm not adopted?" "You're my daughter, Elena. My biological daughter. This house, the estate, the businesses, all of it should have been yours from the moment you turned 18. Robert's hand found hers, gripping with surprising strength. "Victoria knew. She's always known. She convinced me that raising you as the help would keep you safe from those who might challenge your inheritance." I was grieving, not thinking clearly, by the time I realized what she'd done. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Not adopted, not charity, not a burden to be grateful for scraps. Robert's daughter, the rightful heir to everything she'd spent her life serving. "The papers?" Robert continued urgently. "In my study, behind the bookshelf. Press the rose carving. There's a hidden panel. Everything's there. Your birth certificate, the will, documents proving Victoria's deception. James has copies, but Victoria can't know you've seen them yet." Elena's throat felt tight, emotions warring between rage and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. Fear, shame. By the time I understood what Victoria had done, years had passed. "You seemed adapted. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from admitting my cowardice." Footsteps echoed in the hallway, sharp and purposeful. Robert's eyes widened with alarm. "She can't know we talked about this," he whispered urgently. "Promise me, Elena. Get those papers, but be careful. Victoria is more dangerous than you realize." The door opened before Elena could respond. Victoria entered wearing a silk nightgown, her face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. "How is he?" she asked, but her gaze was fixed on Elena with uncomfortable intensity. "Resting," Elena replied, standing quickly. "I was just checking his medication schedule." Victoria's smile was sharp. "How thoughtful. But it's very late, and you have an early morning. Perhaps you should get some sleep." It was clearly a dismissal, but Elena hesitated, looking back at Robert. His eyes held desperate urgency, and his lips formed silent words. "The study. Tonight." "Yes, ma'am," Elena said finally. As she reached the door, Victoria's voice stopped her. Elena? I trust there won't be any confusion about your role here, especially during this difficult time. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Elena met Victoria's pale eyes steadily. Of course not, ma'am. I know exactly who I am. But for the first time in her life, that wasn't entirely true. As Elena descended to her cramped quarters, Robert's revelations echoed in her mind. Not adopted. Not Charity. Robert's daughter. The rightful heir. The truth felt too enormous to contain, too dangerous to fully believe. But Robert's urgency was real, and his fear of Victoria even more so. Tomorrow would bring the usual routine: breakfast preparation, cleaning, endless servitude. But tonight, when the house settled into sleep, Elena would find the courage to claim what might be her birthright. The rose carving, the hidden panel, the truth that could change everything. If she was brave enough to face it. Elena waited until 3 a.m, when even the manor's ancient timbers had settled into silence. She slipped from her narrow cot, bare feet finding the cold floor as her heart hammered against her ribs. Robert's words echoed in her mind. The rose carving. Press the rose carving. The hallways felt different in the darkness, longer, more threatening. Every shadow could hide Victoria's watchful presence. Every creak of old wood sounded like approaching footsteps. Elena moved with practiced stealth, years of early morning routines having taught her which floorboards betrayed movement with telltale groans. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Robert's study lay at the end of the east wing, a room she'd cleaned countless times but never truly examined. Victoria had always been particular about the study. Elena was to dust, vacuum, and leave immediately. No lingering, no curiosity about the books or papers scattered across the massive oak desk. Now Elena understood why. The door's antique handle turned silently under her careful touch. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across leather-bound volumes and expensive furniture. The room smelled of old books, pipe tobacco, and something else. Secrets, perhaps. The weight of hidden truth. Elena approached the bookshelf Robert had mentioned, her eyes scanning carved details she'd never noticed during hurried cleaning sessions. The shelves stretched floor to ceiling, filled with volumes on law, history, and literature. But where was the rose carving? She began examining the ornate molding that framed the bookcase, running her fingers along intricate patterns, vines, leaves, geometric designs, and there, nearly hidden in the corner where shadow met wood, a single rose carved with delicate precision. Elena pressed it. Nothing happened. She tried again, applying more pressure. Still nothing. Panic began rising in her throat. Had Robert been hallucinating? Was this another cruel twist in a life already filled with disappointment? Then she noticed the rose was slightly loose, as if it could be turned rather than simply pressed. She twisted it clockwise and heard a soft click. A section of the bookshelf, perhaps 3 feet wide, swung inward on hidden hinges. Behind it lay a small chamber, no larger than a closet. Elena fumbled for her phone's flashlight, its beam revealing what looked like a private archive. Document boxes lined shelves, and a small desk held manila folders arranged with obsessive care. Elena stepped inside, her hands trembling as she opened the first folder. Her birth certificate stared back at her, but not the one she'd seen before. This one bore different information entirely. Father, Robert James Ashworth. Mother, Catherine Elena Morrison. Date, 22 years ago. Place of birth, Ashworth Manor itself. The paper felt real, official. Elena examined it closely, looking for signs of forgery, but everything appeared authentic. Raised seals, proper signatures, official stamps. This wasn't some elaborate deception. The next folder contained photographs. Elena's breath caught as she saw a woman who looked startlingly like an older version of herself. Same gray-green eyes, same dark hair, same delicate bone structure. The woman stood beside Robert in what was clearly an engagement photo, both of them radiating happiness. Catherine Elena Morrison. Her mother. More photos showed the progression of their relationship: wedding pictures, casual snapshots, and finally, pregnancy photos, where Catherine glowed with joy while Robert's hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. Elena's hands shook as she reached for the next folder. Inside, she found Robert's original will, dated just before her birth. It named Catherine as primary beneficiary, with everything passing to their child should anything happen to both parents. Simple, clear, and completely at odds with what Victoria had always claimed about Elena's status in the family. A medical examiner's report made Elena's stomach clench. Catherine Morrison Ashworth had died in a car accident when Elena was 3 years old. The report was thorough, clinical, and heartbreaking. But it also confirmed Robert's story. Elena had been in the car but survived with minor injuries. The final folder contained something that made Elena's blood run cold. Correspondence between Victoria and a private investigator, dated years ago. The letters discussed maintaining the current arrangement and ensuring Elena remained, quote, unaware of her legal status. References to payments, legal documentation being hidden, and most chilling, discussions about what would happen when Robert died. She must never know, one letter stated in Victoria's precise handwriting. The girl's useful as she is, manageable. Once she understands her true position, she becomes a threat to Marcus and Sophia's futures. Elena sank into the small chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Victoria's deception. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a systematic theft of Elena's entire identity, her inheritance, her very life. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Elena's heart stopped. She quickly gathered the most important documents: birth certificate, photos of her mother, Robert's original will, and stuffed them into the waistband of her pajamas beneath her oversized t-shirt. The hidden chamber's door swung shut with another soft click, just as someone tried the study's main handle. Elena frantically looked for an escape route. The windows were too high and likely alarmed. She settled behind Robert's desk chair just as the door opened. "I thought I heard something." Victoria's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Probably just house settling," came another voice. Thomas Chen, the estate manager. "Old places make noise." Elena held her breath, pressed against the desk's solid back panel. Through the gap beneath the chair, she could see 2 sets of feet, Victoria's elegant slippers and Thomas's work boots. "Check the windows," Victoria commanded. "And examine the bookshelf." Robert was always particular about that wall. Elena's pulse thundered as Thomas approached her hiding spot. His feet stopped just inches from where she crouched. "Everything appears normal, Mrs. Ashworth," Thomas said after a long moment. "No signs of disturbance." But something in his tone made Elena look up. Thomas was staring directly at her hiding spot, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Their eyes met for one terrifying second. Then Thomas stepped back. "Nothing here," he reported calmly. "Perhaps we should return to bed." Victoria lingered a moment longer before following Thomas from the room. Elena waited until their footsteps faded completely before emerging from her hiding place. Thomas had seen her. Elena was certain of it. But instead of exposing her presence, he'd protected her. Why? As Elena made her way back to her quarters, the stolen documents pressed against her skin like brands. Everything she'd believed about her life was a lie. She wasn't the grateful charity case Victoria had trained her to be. She was the rightful heir to everything the Ashworth family possessed. But knowing the truth and claiming it were entirely different challenges. Victoria had spent years crafting this deception, and Elena was certain she wouldn't surrender control without a fight. The question now was whether Elena had the strength to become who she really was, and whether allies like Thomas Chen might help her navigate the dangerous waters ahead. The truth was finally within her grasp. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with it. The documents lay hidden beneath Elena's mattress like buried treasure. Dangerous, precious, and impossible to ignore. She'd managed only 2 hours of sleep before her internal clock forced her awake at 5 a.m. But everything felt different now. The cramped servants' quarters that had always felt like home now seemed like a prison cell. and every movement felt heavy with the weight of her newfound knowledge. As Elena prepared breakfast with mechanical precision, her mind churned with revelations. She was not Elena, the grateful charity case. She was Elena Ashworth, rightful heir to the very manor she served. Every order Victoria gave, every casual cruelty Marcus inflicted, every moment of feeling less than, was built on an elaborate lie. But the most disturbing realization was how perfectly Victoria had orchestrated her subjugation. Not through legal means or official documents, but through something far more insidious, psychological manipulation that had convinced Elena she deserved nothing better. "The eggs are overcooked," Victoria announced as she entered the dining room, her voice carrying its usual note of disappointed authority. Elena looked down at the perfectly prepared eggs, exactly as Robert had always preferred them. "I made them the same way I always do, ma'am." "Don't contradict me," Victoria snapped. But there was something different in her tone this morning, a sharpness that suggested her nerves were frayed. "And when you're finished cleaning up this mess, we need to discuss your living arrangements." Elena's blood chilled. "My living arrangements?" Victoria settled into her chair with calculated grace, arranging her silk robe as if preparing for a performance. "With Mr. Ashworth's condition deteriorating, we need to consider practical matters. A young woman in your situation can't expect to remain here indefinitely." Marcus slouched into the dining room, looking hungover and irritable. "Morning, Elle. Hope you got that wine stain out of the Persian rug. That thing's worth more than most people make in a year." The casual reminder of her place, a servant responsible for cleaning up after his excesses, felt different now. Elena saw it for what it was. Not fact, but performance. A lie they'd all agreed to maintain. "I treated it immediately," Elena replied evenly. "It should be fine." "Should be?" Victoria's eyebrows rose. "That rug has been in this family for generations. It better be more than fine." Elena bit back the response that threatened to spill out, that the rug was hers by right, that this entire house belonged to her, that Victoria was nothing more than a guest who'd outstayed her welcome by 20 years. Instead, she simply nodded. "Of course, ma'am." But Victoria's pale eyes narrowed, as if she sensed something different in Elena's demeanor. "You seem distracted this morning. I hope you're not developing ideas above your station." Before Elena could respond, Sophia drifted into the dining room looking unusually thoughtful. She took her seat without the typical morning pleasantries, studying Elena with an expression that made Elena's skin prickle with awareness. "I had the strangest dream last night," Sophia said quietly, "about voices in the hallway. And footsteps." Victoria's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. "Houses this old make all sorts of noises. You know that." "Yes, but these sounded purposeful, like someone was searching for something." Sophia's gaze remained fixed on Elena. "Do you ever feel like we're living with secrets in this house?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena forced herself to maintain steady eye contact while her heart hammered against her ribs. "I wouldn't know anything about secrets, Miss Sophia. I just do my work." But even as she said it, Elena realized how hollow the word sounded. Sophia heard it too. Her expression shifted to something resembling curiosity mixed with what might have been guilt. After breakfast, Elena was clearing plates when the doorbell rang. Through the dining room windows, she could see a familiar black sedan in the circular drive. James Morrison had arrived earlier than expected. "I'll get it," Victoria said quickly, but Elena noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her movements had become artificially casual. Elena retreated to the kitchen, ostensibly to wash dishes, but positioned herself where she could hear the conversation in the foyer. Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone delivering unwelcome news. "We need to discuss the will reading timeline," he was saying. "Given Mr. Ashworth's current condition, perhaps we should move more quickly than originally planned." "Surely there's no rush," Victoria replied, but Elena could hear strain beneath her polished tone. "Robert is still with us." "Nevertheless, we should be prepared. There are complexities that will require careful handling." Elena's pulse quickened. Morrison knew. Of course he knew. He was her uncle, according to Robert's revelation. But hearing the guilt in his voice, the careful way he chose his words, made Elena realize he'd been carrying this burden for years. The front door closed, and Elena hurried back to her tasks as Victoria returned to the dining room. But Victoria's demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the morning's calculated cruelty, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "Elena," Victoria called sharply, "I need you to clean Mr. Ashworth's study today. Thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly. Dust every book, organize every paper. Make sure nothing is out of place." Elena's mouth went dry. "Of course, ma'am. I'll be out this afternoon, shopping for funeral preparations. It's best to be ready." Victoria's smile was blade-thin. These things can happen so suddenly at his age. The callousness of the statement, discussing Robert's death as if it were a mere inconvenience, made Elena's hands clench into fists. But she simply nodded, playing the part of the obedient servant one more time. After Victoria left, Elena found herself alone with Sophia in the dining room. Marcus had disappeared, probably back to bed to sleep off his hangover. "Elena," Sophia said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Elena tensed. "Of course, Miss Sophia. Do you ever think about what you'd do? If things were different, I mean." "If you weren't?" Sophia gestured vaguely, as if unable to find words for Elena's situation. For a moment, Elena considered telling her everything. Sophia seemed genuinely troubled by the family dynamics, possibly even sympathetic. But Robert's warning echoed in her mind. Victoria was more dangerous than Elena realized. "I try not to think about things I can't change," Elena replied carefully. Sophia nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't satisfied with the answer. "I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About fairness. About how we treat people. About what we really deserve versus what we just take." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning Elena couldn't quite decipher. Was Sophia beginning to question the family's treatment of her? Or was this some kind of test? "Miss Sophia," Elena said quietly, "sometimes it's better not to think too deeply about such things. It only leads to trouble." But even as she spoke, Elena knew she could no longer follow her own advice. The truth was out there now, documented and undeniable. The question was no longer whether she deserved better. It was whether she had the courage to claim what was rightfully hers. And time was running out to decide. Robert Ashworth died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, with Elena holding his hand as dawn broke over the manor. His final words had been whispered so softly that only she could hear them. "Be brave, my daughter. Claim what's yours." Now, 1 week after the funeral, the family gathered in the library for the formal reading of his will. The room felt heavy with expectation and barely concealed greed. Victoria sat in the high-backed leather chair she'd claimed as her own, dressed in elegant black that somehow made her look more predatory than mournful. Marcus lounged nearby, already mentally spending his inheritance, while Sophia perched uncomfortably on the edge of her seat, her usual anxiety heightened by the formal atmosphere. Elena stood near the back wall, technically present but clearly positioned as an observer rather than a participant. James Morrison had insisted she attend, despite Victoria's protests that the help had no business at a family gathering. But Morrison's firm insistence had prevailed, though Elena noticed how he avoided making eye contact with her. Thomas Chen occupied a chair near the window, his presence explained by his role as estate manager. Several other household staff members sat quietly along the wall. The housekeeper, the gardener, and the cook who'd served the family for decades. Morrison cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he opened his leather portfolio. "We're gathered today to hear the last will and testament of Robert James Ashworth, dated." He paused, consulting his papers with unusual care. "Actually, there are 2 wills we need to discuss. The first, dated 15 years ago, and a more recent version dated just 6 months ago." Victoria's composed expression flickered for just a moment. "2 wills? Surely you mean the one Robert signed after his stroke last year." "No, Mrs. Ashworth. I mean the will Robert executed in perfect mental health 6 months ago. in the presence of 3 witnesses and a court-appointed mental health evaluator. Morrison's voice carried new authority. The previous will, the one you're familiar with, has been superseded. Elena felt the room's atmosphere shift, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Marcus straightened in his chair, while Sophia's knuckles whitened as she gripped her purse. Morrison began reading the smaller bequests, generous gifts to longtime staff members, charitable donations, and personal items distributed among friends. Thomas Chen received a substantial sum and a cottage on the estate grounds, which he accepted with quiet dignity. Now we come to the primary inheritance, Morrison continued, his voice steadying with professional resolve. To my beloved daughter. Son, Victoria interrupted sharply. Marcus is his only son. Morrison looked up, his eyes finally meeting Elena's across the room. No, Mrs. Ashworth. Daughter. He took a deep breath. To my beloved daughter, Elena Catherine Ashworth. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus shot to his feet, face flushing red. That's impossible. Elena isn't even family. She's adopted. Elena was never adopted, Morrison stated clearly. She is Robert's biological daughter with his late wife, Catherine Morrison Ashworth. All documentation proving this relationship is legally filed and verified. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena felt every eye in the room turn to her, but she remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Victoria's mask of composure finally cracked. This is preposterous. Robert had no biological children beyond Marcus and Sophia. Elena is a charity case we took in out of kindness. Mrs. Ashworth. Morrison's voice cut through her protests like a blade. Elena is Robert's daughter with his first wife, Catherine, who died in a car accident when Elena was 3 years old. You were aware of this relationship when you married Robert, and you deliberately concealed Elena's true identity to benefit your own children. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Elena watched Victoria's face cycle through emotions: denial, calculation, and finally, cold fury. You're lying, Marcus snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. Show us proof. Morrison produced a manila folder thick with documents. Birth certificate listing Robert as father. Marriage certificate between Robert and Catherine Morrison. Death certificate for Catherine Morrison Ashworth. Medical records from the accident that killed Catherine but left Elena with minor injuries. And correspondence. His voice hardened, between Mrs. Victoria Ashworth and various parties discussing how to maintain Elena's false status as a servant. Elena's legs felt weak. Hearing her true story laid out so clinically made it real in a way that her midnight discovery hadn't. She was Robert's daughter. This had all been a lie. Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena? Is this true? Elena met her eyes, no longer looking up at a superior, but across as an equal. Yes, she said quietly. It's true. Continue reading, Victoria commanded, her voice brittle as glass. This changes nothing legally until proven in court. Morrison's smile was thin. There's more. To Elena Catherine Ashworth, I leave the entirety of my estate. Ashworth Manor and all properties, the complete business portfolio, all bank accounts, investments, and personal possessions. She is to be the sole executor of this will and inheritor of everything I possess. Marcus lunged forward as if to grab the documents. That's not possible. Mother said. Your mother, Morrison interrupted coldly, has been living off Elena's inheritance for the past 19 years. The allowances she's received, the credit accounts, the household expenses, all of it drawn from funds that rightfully belong to Elena. The room erupted. Marcus shouted accusations of fraud while Victoria sat frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Sophia stared at Elena with a mixture of shock and what might have been admiration. But Elena found herself looking at Thomas Chen, who was watching her with something resembling pride. He'd known, she realized, probably for years. There are additional provisions, Morrison continued, raising his voice above the chaos. Elena has full discretion over the living arrangements of all current household residents. She may choose to provide housing and support, or she may request that parties find alternative accommodations. The threat was clear. Elena now held power over the people who had controlled her entire life. Victoria finally found her voice, cold and venomous. You think this changes anything? You're still the same pathetic girl who spent her life cleaning our messes. Money can't change what you are. Elena straightened, feeling something shift inside her, 22 years of submission finally cracking away like an old shell. When she spoke, her voice carried new authority. You're right about one thing, Mrs. Ashworth. Money can't change what I am. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across each family member. I am Robert Ashworth's daughter. I am the rightful owner of this manor, and I am no longer your servant. The words felt like liberation itself. The library emptied slowly after Morrison's bombshell revelation, leaving Elena alone with the family that had defined her entire existence through lies. The silence stretched taut as piano wire, broken only by the grandfather clock's steady ticking, a sound that now marked Elena's time rather than counting down to her next servant's duty. Victoria was the first to speak, her voice carrying the honeyed poison Elena knew so well. My dear Elena, she began, rising from her chair with practiced grace. This must be overwhelming for you. So much responsibility thrust upon someone so unprepared. Elena remained standing near the window, afternoon light casting her in sharp relief against the dark wood paneling. I'm listening. Of course you are, darling. You've always been such a good listener. Victoria moved closer, her approach calculated like a predator testing its prey. But listen carefully now. Legal documents are one thing. Actually managing an estate like this? That requires experience, connections, understanding of complex financial systems, things you couldn't possibly have learned while doing what you've been doing. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his earlier bluster replaced by something resembling panic. Look, Elena, maybe we can work something out. I mean, we're still family, right? We grew up together. Did we? Elena's voice was quiet but carried new steel. Because my memories involve you treating me like hired help while you lived off what was rightfully mine. Sophia spoke from her corner chair, voice barely audible. I never knew. I swear, Elena, I never knew that you were father's real daughter. Elena studied Sophia's face, searching for deception but finding only genuine shock and mounting guilt. What did you think, Sophia? Did you ever wonder why I lived in a storage room while you had the entire third floor? Sophia's composure cracked. Mother said you preferred it that way. That you were shy. That you liked having your own space away from family areas. Victoria's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. How touchingly naive you both are. Elena, dear, you may own this house on paper, but do you really think you can simply step into Robert's shoes? Do you know how to manage the business portfolio? The staff? The social obligations that come with the Ashworth name? Elena felt the familiar tug of self-doubt, the voice that had whispered for years that she wasn't worthy, wasn't capable, wasn't enough. But Robert's final words echoed stronger. Be brave, my daughter. Then teach me, Elena said simply. You've had 20 years of practice managing my inheritance. Surely you can share that expertise with its rightful owner. Victoria's mask slipped for a moment, revealing something predatory underneath. And what would be my incentive for such cooperation? Continued residence in this house, financial support, the comfortable lifestyle you've grown accustomed to. Elena paused, letting the implications settle. Or you can find alternative arrangements. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Marcus shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. You can't just throw us out. This is our home too. No, Marcus, this is my home. It always has been. Elena's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. But I'm not heartless. Despite everything, Robert raised you as his son. That has to count for something. She turned to address all three of them, feeling the weight of generations of Ashworth authority settling on her shoulders. Here's what's going to happen. Victoria, you'll move to the guest wing. The master suite was never yours to occupy. Marcus, you'll take a smaller room on the second floor. Sophia. Elena hesitated, remembering the morning's untouched breakfast offered with genuine kindness. Sophia, you may keep your current rooms if you wish. Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. You ungrateful little... Careful, Elena interrupted, her voice carrying warning. I may be new to wielding power, but I learn quickly. And I have excellent teachers now. She gestured toward the doorway where Thomas Chen stood waiting, his expression carefully neutral but supportive. Thomas stepped forward with quiet authority. Miss Elena, James Morrison is waiting in the main parlor to discuss the business transition. There are also several estate managers requesting meetings, and the household staff would like to offer their congratulations. Elena noticed how Thomas addressed her, no longer as the family servant, but as the estate's owner. The shift felt surreal but right. Thank you, Thomas. Please tell Mr. Morrison I'll be with him shortly. She turned back to Victoria and her children. We'll discuss living arrangements in detail tomorrow. Tonight, I suggest you all take time to process these changes. As Elena moved toward the door, Sophia's voice stopped her. Elena, what you said about the breakfast this morning, about me offering you food. Sophia's voice trembled. I always felt something was wrong. The way Mother treated you, the way we all treated you. I should have spoken up. I should have done something. Elena studied her half-sister's face, seeing genuine remorse mixed with fear. Sophia, you were raised to believe I was beneath you. You can't be held responsible for lies you were told from childhood. But I can be held responsible for what I do now, Sophia said quietly. Going forward, I mean. If you'll let me, I'd like to try to be a real sister to you. Victoria's sharp intake of breath suggested her displeasure with Sophia's defection, but Elena felt something loosen in her chest, the first genuine offer of family relationship she'd ever received. I'd like that, Elena replied simply. As she left the library, Elena caught Marcus whispering urgently to his mother, their heads bent in conspiracy. She'd won this first battle, but Victoria's calculating gaze promised the war was far from over. The real challenge would be proving she deserved the power she'd inherited, and deciding what kind of leader she wanted to become. 3 days after the will reading, Elena sat behind Robert's massive oak desk for the first time as its rightful owner. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating financial reports and business documents that Thomas Chen had carefully organized for her review. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She now occupied the seat of power from which Victoria had orchestrated 20 years of deception. A knock at the study door interrupted her concentration. Come in, she called, still adjusting to the authority in her own voice. Kate Rivera entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of fierce grin Elena hadn't seen since childhood. Well, look at you, Kate said, settling into the chair across from the desk. From servant to CEO in under a week. How does it feel? Elena accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Terrifying. Overwhelming. Like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. Except it's not someone else's life. It's the life that was stolen from you. Kate's expression grew serious. Elena, I need you to understand something. This isn't about luck or charity or even justice. This is about you finally becoming who you were meant to be. Before Elena could respond, Thomas Chen appeared in the doorway. Miss Elena, forgive the interruption, but there's something you need to see. Elena followed Thomas to the manor's front windows, where they could observe Victoria's silver Mercedes pulling away from the circular drive. In the passenger seat sat a man Elena didn't recognize, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit, carrying the unmistakable bearing of legal authority. Third lawyer this week, Thomas said quietly. She's been making calls, scheduling meetings. Yesterday she drove to the county courthouse. Elena's stomach tightened. What do you think she's planning? Challenges to your inheritance, most likely. Claims about Robert's mental competency. Allegations about the will's authenticity. Perhaps even accusations of undue influence. Thomas's voice carried decades of experience managing estate politics. She's not going to surrender 20 years of comfortable living without a fight. Kate moved beside them, her jaw set with determination. Then we fight back. Elena, you have James Morrison on your side, you have documented proof of your identity, and you have witnesses to Victoria's deception. But I don't have experience, Elena admitted. Victoria knows these people. Judges, lawyers, society figures. She understands how to navigate their world in ways I never learned. Thomas turned to face her directly. Miss Elena, may I share something about your father? Robert Ashworth wasn't born into wealth. His father was a carpenter who built this manor with his own hands. Robert earned everything through intelligence, integrity, and the courage to make difficult decisions. Those same qualities live in you. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for Thomas's steady support, but also a growing awareness of the challenges ahead. What about Marcus? How is he handling all this? Thomas's expression darkened. That's another concern. Yesterday he attempted to access the estate's accounts using old authorization codes. When that failed, he made several calls to business contacts, claiming there had been some kind of clerical error with the inheritance. He's actively working against me, Elena said, though she wasn't surprised. It appears so. But, Miss Sophia? Thomas paused, choosing his words carefully. She asked to speak with you this afternoon. She seemed quite determined about something. An hour later, Sophia knocked hesitantly on the study door. When she entered, Elena was struck by how different she looked, less polished, more genuine, as if she'd been stripped of the artificial confidence wealth had always provided. Elena, I need to tell you something, Sophia began, settling nervously into the chair Kate had vacated. About Mother's meetings, about what she's planning. Elena leaned forward, sensing important information. I'm listening. She's not just challenging the will legally. She's spreading rumors throughout our social circle, stories about you being mentally unstable, about Robert being manipulated in his final months, about the will being forged. Sophia's voice grew stronger. But there's more. She's been in contact with Marcus's friends from college. Some of them have connections to private investigators, people who specialize in discrediting inheritance claims. Elena felt cold despite the warm afternoon. Why are you telling me this? Sophia met her eyes directly. Because I spent 20 years watching you serve our family with more grace and dignity than any of us deserved. Because you offered me kindness yesterday when you had every right to throw me out with the rest of them. And because... She hesitated, then continued with quiet resolve. Because I'm tired of being part of something ugly. What do you want from me, Sophia? I want to help. I know Mother's contacts, her strategies, her weaknesses. I know which lawyers she trusts, which judges she's cultivated relationships with, which society matrons she depends on for social validation. Sophia's voice grew firm. I can't undo 20 years of complicity, but I can choose which side I'm on going forward. Elena studied her half-sister's face, searching for deception but finding only determination mixed with genuine remorse. If you help me, Victoria will never forgive you. You'll be choosing me over your own mother. She stopped being a mother the moment she decided to steal your life for our benefit, Sophia replied. I won't be part of that anymore. Elena felt something shift inside her, the first genuine family alliance she'd ever experienced. What do you need from me? Trust. And the chance to prove I can be the sister you deserved all along. As afternoon light slanted through the study windows, Elena realized her circle of allies was growing. Kate provided grounding and unconditional support. Thomas offered wisdom and institutional knowledge. James Morrison brought legal expertise. And now Sophia provided insider intelligence about Victoria's machinations. But Victoria's resources were formidable. Wealth, connections, and the ruthless determination of someone with everything to lose. The real battle for Elena's inheritance was just beginning, and she would need every ally she could gather to survive what was coming. Victoria's assault came at dawn, swift and calculated. Elena woke to find process servers at the manor's front door, delivering legal documents challenging her inheritance on grounds of mental incompetency and fraudulent documentation. By noon, 3 local newspapers had run stories questioning the legitimacy of Robert Ashworth's final will, complete with unnamed sources suggesting Elena had manipulated a dying man. James Morrison arrived within hours, his face grim as he reviewed the legal challenges. "She's thorough," he admitted, spreading documents across Elena's desk. Competency hearings, forensic document analysis, requests for psychiatric evaluation. She's throwing everything at the wall. But Victoria had overplayed her hand. Elena's sound mental state, while forensic analysis confirmed the will's authenticity beyond doubt. More damaging to Victoria's case, Sophia testified about her mother's deliberate concealment of Elena's true identity, providing insider testimony that destroyed Victoria's credibility. The final blow came when Thomas Chen produced 20 years of household records, meticulously documenting Elena's servant treatment, despite her legal status as Robert's daughter and heir. Within 2 weeks, every challenge had failed. Victoria's desperate gambit had accomplished only one thing: publicly exposing her own deception, while solidifying Elena's rightful claim to the Ashworth legacy. With Victoria's legal challenges defeated, Elena faced her most difficult decision yet: what to do with the woman who had stolen her life. Victoria sat across from her in the study, stripped of her usual imperious confidence, waiting to learn her fate. "You could have me arrested," Victoria said quietly, her voice lacking its customary venom. "Fraud, theft, conspiracy, the charges would stick." Elena studied the woman who had defined her existence through cruelty and manipulation. "I could," she agreed, "but prison won't undo 20 years of lies." "Then what do you want from me?" "Acknowledgement. Not just of what you did, but of who I really am." Elena's voice carried newfound authority. "You will move to the cottage Thomas prepared on the grounds. You'll receive a modest monthly allowance, enough for dignity, not luxury. And you will never again interfere with my decisions regarding this estate." Victoria's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "And Marcus?" "Marcus has a choice. He can work genuinely for his place in the family business, or he can find his own path elsewhere." Elena paused. "But he will do so without access to Ashworth accounts or the trust fund he's been drawing from. He won't take that well. Then he'll learn what real consequences feel like." Sophia entered the study as Victoria left, the 2 women passing without acknowledgement. Elena's half-sister had blossomed in recent weeks, her natural empathy no longer suppressed by her mother's toxic influence. "I've been thinking about the children's hospital wing Father planned," Sophia said, settling into her chair. "Perhaps we could expand it, make it a memorial to our real mother as well." Elena smiled, the first genuine family conversation of her life. "I'd like that very much." Outside, Kate was organizing Elena's first charity event, while Thomas managed the estate's business interests with renewed energy. For the first time, Elena felt the weight of her inheritance, not as burden, but as opportunity. The Ashworth legacy would be about service, not dominance. About lifting others, not keeping them down. Justice, Elena had learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about creating something better than what came before. 6 months after the will reading, Ashworth Manor glowed with warm light and genuine laughter for the first time in decades. Elena stood in the main hall, watching guests arrive for the Catherine Morrison Ashworth Memorial Foundation's inaugural charity gala, an event that would have been unimaginable during Victoria's reign of cold manipulation. The manor itself reflected Elena's transformation of the family legacy. Gone were the oppressive formalities that had made the house feel like a museum. In their place was elegant warmth, fresh flowers from the estate gardens, comfortable seating arrangements that encouraged conversation, and most importantly, staff members who moved with pride rather than fear. Thomas Chen approached, wearing the dignified bearing of a man whose loyalty had finally been properly recognized. "Miss Elena, the final attendance count is remarkable. 250 guests, including 3 state senators and the governor himself." Elena smiled, adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother, one of many precious items Robert had secretly preserved. "My father would be proud. This is exactly what he envisioned for the Ashworth name." Sophia appeared at her elbow, radiant in a midnight blue gown, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had found authentic purpose. "The children's hospital wing is fully funded," she reported excitedly. "Dr. Martinez says they can break ground next month." "And Marcus?" Elena asked, though she'd already spotted her half-brother across the room, engaged in animated conversation with several business leaders. "He's actually impressing people," Sophia admitted, with surprised pleasure. "Working at the foundation has changed him. Yesterday he told me he never realized how good it felt to build something, instead of just expecting to inherit it." Kate joined their small circle, looking elegant but maintaining the no-nonsense demeanor that had grounded Elena through her darkest moments. "The press coverage has been incredible. 3 major newspapers want to do feature stories about your foundation work. You're officially the most respected Ashworth in generations." Elena's gaze swept across the gathering. Former servants now employed as valued staff members, community leaders engaged in meaningful philanthropy, and family members finally relating to each other with genuine affection. Even Victoria, visible through the window in her modest cottage garden, seemed to have found a kind of peace in her reduced circumstances. "You know what the strangest part is?" Elena said quietly. "I used to dream about escaping this place. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Thomas nodded with paternal pride. "Your father always said the manor wasn't about the building. It was about what the people inside chose to create." As the evening progressed, Elena found herself in the very spot where she'd once scrubbed floors, now receiving congratulations from governors and philanthropists. The transformation felt complete, but more importantly, it felt genuine. She had inherited more than wealth. She had inherited the power to redefine what the Ashworth name meant. And she had chosen compassion over vengeance, service over dominance, building over destroying. The servant had become the master, but the master had chosen to serve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.